Hello, sunshine. Welcome back to another episode of heartablazepodcast. I'm your host, Timmy, and today we're going to do a pretty special post. It's going to be a bit more of my rambling, but I wanted to talk about my podcast learning curve because I think this would be very useful to someone, especially there's someone on the community group that I'm with for personal growth. He is really interested in getting into podcasts at some point. So I think that would be really, really beneficial for him to hear from someone's first-hand experience, especially from me. I will be honest, I think, and you'll hear about this in more detail in a second, but I think that I was a little bit rash with the way I approached it, kind of jumped in head first without researching and especially going through a lot of components first that I should have done. Like, I think, it's part of the ADHD mind. You kind of just jump into things and kind of like go, yeah, we got to get started. Let's do it as soon as we can. But really, there is a more logical approach. But anyway, let's get straight into it. So I think the first thing I would mention is you want to be gentle with yourself when you're learning something new. You will have moments where you get frustrated. You just want to remember that be gentle, be kind, know that you are trying and you're learning something, and it's essential to be stupid before you become smart about anything that you learn. So, it's a learning process. Just remember to take a deep breath in and keep going at it. Consistency is what builds progress. Now, the thing that I started with was very, very basic. My basic setup at the beginning was just my laptop, and it was not a very good one. It was a HP one. It was pretty cheap, and I had it for a very long time, so it was kind of on a way out already. And then I had a Yeti. I'll put a picture of it. It was a Yeti microphone, but it was one of the actual mics, and it has a USB plug that plugs into the computer. It was actually really good. The recording quality was quite good for its pricing. I remember it being pretty affordable. And it had quite a lot of settings, so it did kind of allow, if you used it correctly, to kind of record two people at the same time over the same one device, one mic. But it wasn't ideal, and especially for me, I really need to hold my mic pretty close because I'm quite a soft-spoken person, and I have learned to project much and much more, which with every episode that I've started developing, especially this season, I've worked on it a lot. One part of it is to build confidence. One part is to make sure that, people who are actually spending time listening to my podcast episodes actually can hear what I'm saying nice and proper. Now, the other thing I really want to talk about here is, so I have used the reason why I went straight into it was because I did have some experience in terms of recording. I used to do YouTube baking videos. Believe it or not, I have a patisserie certificate in advanced diploma, so 3 levels of basic, intermediate, and advanced. What was I going to say? But yeah, so I used to record basically step-by-step baking videos, and it was all trying to be experimental. That's where the name, if you follow my original Instagram account before I switched all my stuff to my Heart Ablaze podcast account on Instagram, used to be on an account called Sugary Lab, which is still my main account for when I enjoy viewing things and when I reach out and talk to people. But my posts are all on Instagram. On Instagram are all now on Heart Ablaze podcast now. Anyway. So that's the reason why I kind of jumped straight into basically filming stuff and producing the episodes, is because I was kind of okay, I can kind of figure this out pretty quickly. Now, I think the learning stuff I ended up doing was kind of how to kind of process the audios better, what apps to use and such. But yeah, so it was pretty quick process to start getting things up and running. A lot of it was kind of just as I thought of it, I kind of started building up my knowledge about it and started working on it and started producing things through it. But I think, obviously any logical person would know that this is probably not the best approach for it. So if I was you, I would recommend, from my experience, your first steps right now, if you decide that, hey, I want to start a podcast. Okay, obviously, consider your name. Think about how easy your name is to remember, how special it would be, how relatable to the concept. Having a concept is very, very important. what is it that you are thinking about as your concept, like your main goals? What are the target audience that you want to attract? What is the kind of topics that you want to cover? What is the goals, like criteria that episodes should fulfill? I have a checklist on my phone. I can screenshot that as well. I've been building that up. It's basically a notes where it covers all of my ideas. So I jot down all my ideas and then start organizing them eventually when I have time as well into categories. So I can also kind of work with categories and diversify my episodes by alternating them in a certain way. But at the very top, I put inspirational quotes of things that remind me of the most important things about like my objectives or aspirations as a person, but also as like the podcaster. And then follow down there, I list a few points where it's kind of like the main criteria is like things that I really, really want to strive to accomplish. Like, what's important? Is it like, do I want to cover diversity of topics? Do I want to make a huge impact on the world? Do I want people to have, like a really fun time? Do I want, whatever. That's just for example. And it could be like much more chilled kind of topics. You don't have to be like someone who's world changing every time. Someone could be just wanting to change everyone's life by having a great time and having a really good laugh. That's what comedy stand-up is for. And those people are amazing. And, I laugh a lot when I watch videos about them. By the way, one of my favorite comedians is Sarah Millican. She's absolutely great. She like shoots out jokes like a machine gun. It's like so many funny jokes and so quick-witted that you almost don't have time to laugh at all of them. Anyway, I digress. Now, so what I recommend you doing is after the name is kind of done, that's one thing that you should consider, concept. And then next, obviously, you need to do your research on in terms of like your equipment and also like what you can afford. Now, we are pretty lucky in this day and age. There is a huge abundance of different technology levels and things that you can afford. Like most of the equipment that I buy can range from like, I think generally they're about $50 or less for every equipment item, unless it's like, if you want a camera or a phone or something that might cost a little bit more. That's a little bit less sort of flexible in that area, unless you want something that will break very easily. But yeah, be smart about your purchases. Note that like what kind of price ranges make sense, because some things just would not cost a certain price range. It just doesn't make sense and it will break. For example, a good example is I once bought a stand mixer because I couldn't afford, a hand mixer. I couldn't afford a stand mixer at the time. And I was making a cake for a friend who commissioned me essentially to make one for his boyfriend. And it was, I chose to make a buttercream cake, which I was very, very smart for making that decision. Irony, hopefully, sarcasm, hopefully you understood. And I made a huge slab for God knows what reason. I just decided that I'll make something that big with that amount of buttercream and a person and a $10 hand mixer. You can tell what probably have happened. I was basically only 1/3 of the way through mixing, trying to get it really aerated and nice and creamy and soft and silky. I smelled motor burning, and that $10 hand mixer had burnt out already. And yeah, so, if I spent a little bit more, which I could have afforded at the time, I could have probably at least gotten something a little bit stronger, even if it's still a hand mixer. But that's a great example. But we'll go into more detail as we talk about the equipment separately. So I would recommend definitely not going with something that's plug-in unless you're very certain that you're going to have a space for recording, like a lot of professional podcasters, who have like 2 people, you have a setup, you have guests coming into your recording space rather than you going to other people's places, or you have a recording booth. Anyhow, that's a very different area, and I can't really tell you too much about those kind of mics because I've never actually gone into it. I will probably consider it at some point if I'm upgrading to have extra equipment for that kind of area. But at this stage, I'm very happy with what I have, and it works really well, and I love these mics. I will place like links to the equipment actually that I'm using specifically if you want to have a look, and you can kind of gauge, see what else there is. Yeah, just before that, it's getting a bit hot wearing this actually. Let's see. I was trying to hide my messy hair. Yeah, so from there, basically, the first thing I wanted to upgrade when I decided to upgrade, which was a little bit further past, like I think probably around season 2 that I decided to do that can't actually specifically remember. So I would say immediately upgrade to something that is Bluetooth, wireless. So obviously offers you the choice to actually interview people and walk around and be detached from be able to go to like different places, basically carry around with you. So what I'm using is a BOYA brand mic. It comes two in a set, and it basically has a plug-in for your phone, but you just have to make sure you know which kind of phone you are, because those are I want to say brand specific, but it's basically Android or iPhone specific. So the plugins are obviously very different. But you get the same stuff essentially. You get the plug-in, goes into the phone, that automatically connects. And then this kind of basically needs to be switched on. You've got the one side with the button for switching it on. Then you have the other button, which is noise cancelling and isolating, which is what I always use. And it has the green light to show you that it's done, like that's switched on. You'll be able to tell the difference very, very drastically, because I think the first time I used it, I didn't realize that, and it made a huge difference when I did. Yeah, and that has opened up a huge, area for me. And another issue I was having was, for some reason, over certain things like Zoom and such, Yeti had a huge problem connecting. It just, maybe it was a bit old or something, or maybe it wasn't, my computer was shit. It was just having a huge ton of issue connecting. I always had to like go through thousands of hoops just to try to get it to work. And when it did, there was still a lot of problems. And even with the noise cancellation on that, it still was absorbing quite a few of the sounds. I was at the point where I couldn't even turn on my fan when it was really hot, and I was trying to, interview someone in my place, and it made it really unprofessional to host someone when the conditions are so bad. Yeah, so definitely do that. And how BOYA worked when I was just doing audio, and when I was using a camera setup instead. I was using a camera because I already had one. That's what I used for filming a lot of stuff, which has its own issues, which we'll cover in a second too. But basically that meant I caught the audio separately on my phone. And BOYA has a specific app that you can download. It's free and does it very well. You just go into settings, you set up like you want like a wireless mic, blah, 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 blah. And then what kind of settings for the audio. Then you kind of switch over and then you start recording. Then you pause, save, and then it goes into the files. And then you can kind of do whatever you want with the files. Obviously, I've switched over to my phone now. It took a very long time to make that simple decision, and it was all thanks to an episode with TGAR that I realized that I should have made the switch a long time ago. And it's made the transition between filming and editing so much more seamless. And I can go from filming to uploading within about 1 hour time frames most of the days, which is super quick. And other days it would take me like a whole day just to kind of get everything sorted and start editing and kind of getting to the process of finally about to upload, which is very frustrating. It slowed me down a lot. And this is part of the reason why I can actually adapt to a 3-day upload schedule every week now and stick to it. Because, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of new things I need to learn, a lot of issues, and just, sometimes things still happen that frustrate me. But compared to before, it is way, way easier. And I wished I knew that a long time ago. So obviously my next step that I want to recommend to you, with all that being said, is do your research on your equipment first. Let's start what kind of equipment you can think of. First of all, I can recommend you for sure. You need obviously your device for filming. You need to know what device you're filming on. You need to decide your mic. Is it compatible? How compatible is it? How good is it? And that comes with device storage problems. That comes up a lot, especially if you're going to film a lot, and if you're filming alone and you're storing things alone, editing alone. Storage is going to be particularly important. That's one of the biggest problems I run into on my phone. It just doesn't have a lot of storage, so I wish I kind of went with a phone with a lot more storage. Next, you want a tripod for sure. I have been using a tiny little phone holder thing that kind of acts like a tripod, but doesn't really have a hold and grip and everything, for literally 2 seasons. And I can tell you, this tripod was the best $30 I ever spent. It's amazing. It's got all the angles, and my light just went off because maybe it's out of charge. That's great. But it does all the things. It swirls, turns, has different heights. So it's amazing. I wish I had done that rather than have to prop it on my my Duna and try to angle it and do all this weird stuff with it, which I have been doing for like 2 seasons. So that's crazy. Definitely do the research on that. There's so many options available, so many price ranges, and so many good ones. And another good one about this one is, which I'll link below as well. This one came with like a little remote, so it basically switches it on for capturing. You can take photos or like the video start and stop with it. So it's really good. Really nice feature. Part of the reason why I chose this one over many other ones. Lighting is particularly important. You can tell the difference. This is actually probably a good time for it to switch off. A good example, how big of a difference it makes. I'm sorry, I'm so oily looking. But yeah, so you can tell like my light. I think depending on your space, it's quite important, and which is another point I want to bring up, is consider your filming space, because when you're selecting a space to film, you want to kind of test out the lighting, see how it shows up on your final feed. Like, do you like the angle? For me, wearing glasses, you can see often lighting reflects on it. It can be a bit irritating for me. I just don't really like the look of that on the camera. I want to just see my face, see my eyes and everything. Yeah, and so consider the lighting. There are different price ranges. Again, there's also different styles. You can go really ham out on it and buy like a whole ring light. In my case, I'll show you later, but it's basically a small square device, and it has a few different settings. It even has like sort of environment settings where it's like siren setting or like candlelight setting, and you can adjust the regular light to more warm or more cold sort of lighting, which I really liked, because my room is quite warm, but it does also look pretty weird when it's a little bit too cold. It makes it look very surgical, very like hospital-like. So you kind of want the balance between it, and that offers it, which is really, really great. And the brand has its own like tripod, which was very adjustable and very, very tall. So that's really cool. What else? Yeah, I would definitely look into device storage, be a little bit certain on that beforehand, because device storage is it's such a huge problem for me. I just like, basically my schedule right now is I record and then I usually edit straight away, upload straight away, clear the space, because I need to record new episodes and new ideas so often. Right now is a particularly busy time for me. I've got like commissions for a hat for like a friend that I'm trying to film that. I've got an art show that I'm like drawing some art for, that is meant to be anonymous until like it's sold, which is until May and June. But I want to have some footage for that to cover the episode. So what I've been doing is I've been filming all this little stuff, and then I've been basically uploading it onto YouTube in private, so that I have like the footage that I can just download later. It's just a loophole I found, like a little trick, not a loophole, I guess like a little hack I found, which has been working a treat. And YouTube uploads pretty quickly and efficiently, and I don't have to worry about any problems compared to Spotify. Which brings me to my other point. Your next research 100% needs to be, which kind of also ties in a little bit with researching about like, what you're filming with, because, that can decide what kind of format your video is going to be. You want to cover a research about your platforms. Try to see what kind of platforms are out there for uploading. So for example, a platform be Spotify. I think iTunes is one as well. There's one that's really good. That's apparently one of the top ones competing with Spotify, called BeanPod or Podbean. BeanPod, I think, which I'm starting to look into. But yeah, so you want to look into the platforms, because one of the things that I kind of neglected and jumped onto Spotify straight away, which I slightly regret, is I didn't really look into, when you're looking into like doing this as a full-time job, obviously monetization becomes rather important. Now, monetization will require you to achieve a few achievements, I guess, basically checking off a few criteria in order to actually unlock the feature so that you can start monetizing your material. Generally, this kind of includes something like achieving a certain amount of listeners. That's usually a basic one, and then there's usually a couple more. I can't remember off the top of my head, which I actually should. But the other thing that you really should be researching is how big the revenue is. How much of a percentage are you really getting out of these episodes compared to the business, the platform that is actually running your episodes? Now, recently I kind of had a little bit of a hard awakening because I just learned that one of my friends who I'm making the hat for, actually, if you don't know, check him out. He's on Instagram. He's called Brezie, Brezie. He also is a producer, runs his, so if you're in Australia, he runs a production, like a music production studio down in DY. So you can look him up. It's called Flow State Studio. A little plug for him. So recently he pulled all his music. He had a huge archive, by the way. Pulled his music off Spotify, and the reason is, I don't know the specific percentage, but basically he started posting music on there since November 2021, I believe he said, and it's now 26. That's 5 years, almost 5 years. And guess how much he has made with all of that music? He has made $61 ish, which is a crazy amount. I mean, think of it in the perspective that, for example, I work in like a cafe usually, and if I go into a cafe nowadays, the lowest maybe would be like, generally about $28 to $30 an hour, and I could basically work 2 hours and I cover that, and that's a 5-month period for him, which is crazy. For music, arts need to be way more than that. So he's a very fast-thinking, very smart person, and is one of the reasons I follow his stories so much, because it's always very thought-provoking and always very, very uplifting and inspirational, and keeps you on your toes. And he's not afraid to say what he thinks. And so he, as such a avant-garde artist, I might say, has decided, which I'm going to link below as well, has basically decided to pull all his music off that platform. And he has decided not to actually put it on another platform, but instead he's going to start doing a movement where he's bringing back MP3 players. So what he's done is he's got a wireless, he's now promoting a wireless Bluetooth MP3 player. And it's basically like a little USB looking device. And it's got, depending on the package you buy, it's got different amounts of the songs from the archive placed in it. And it's rechargeable and everything. And if you're very, very young, MP3 players are something we used to listen to music on. It started with CD players when CDs were available. Then that's the next thing that kind of came about with MP3 players. You had nano iPods and such, all these devices from Apple and such. And then which eventually went on into just the streaming platforms. But yeah, it's a really, really good investment. I will 100% recommend you supporting him and getting this movement, because it actually supports the artists more, and he's charging such a ridiculously cheap price for it. It's so affordable. I have just placed my order earlier today, and I did a $37, I think it was, package, which included a bunch of songs, but included the MP3 player for free. All in all, he's just a very cool and interesting, fun guy to watch as well. So definitely follow him on Instagram, and yeah, just go support his movement. Let's see where this can take them. I'm actually been thinking about going to artists that I like and seeing if I can get, them CDs and cassette tapes, and see if they want to try to bring back some of those as sort of like a merch. Yes, that requires listeners to actually go out and buy the devices for playing them, but I just think that it would be really, really cool. All right, let's move on. Yeah, I think the next thing then you can consider is, obviously with all the topics and stuff, you should be starting to figure this out. Obviously, you want to consider what kind of episodes you want to do, how often your schedules are, your posting schedule. You want to figure out how easy posting is, what platform you're using, how does it work. A good thing that definitely want to consider, and I figured this out sort of around early season 2, but it was until season 3 that I've really, really sat down and kind of decided on the format and be very specific. And this helps with networking. So networking is a very big part. Thankfully, we have something like Instagram that really connects us to the world readily. But you can use any kind of platform, social media, to reach out to people. Just remember one thing: you're going to get a lot of no's and no responses. Some people are really, really big and really, really well known. In my case, I do interviews, especially with music artists, a lot. That's one of the things I really enjoy and am passionate about. And what I've noticed is it does nothing to do with that. It's I've had people who were already pretty well known. Someone who was already on BBC Radio, which is pretty big, and he took up my offer on doing an interview. I've had people who are really well off, don't probably need the exposure, and already know what they're doing. Still take up on the offer, and they're happy. And now they've blown up right after like less than a year, and they're still willing to take up a chance with having a catch-up, follow-up interview. So just let your ideas come to paper. Don't limit yourself. Write down everything that you want to do, everything that you think is an authentic, good idea that you personally would really want to hear about. Start with that, and then kind of work on it more, and you can kind of edit and hone in on like more specifics, I guess. For me, diversity is very, very fun, and is what drives the channel. So I try to think of as many different kind of ideas and keep it fresh and fun. Yeah. So don't limit yourself. Make sure to reach out to as many people as you want. Always shoot your shot. You never know what comes your way. That's my experience. I'm, at literally like sometimes like 5 or 7 listens per week, which is incredibly low, especially at like, year 2 and season 3. But I'm very, very slowly building my networking, and I'm getting more and more, through more other people that you meet and interview, you gain a new area of like people who are surrounded by them, and they can bring in a lot more listeners as well. It's equally as exciting and cool of an opportunity for them as well. So don't forget that. And don't downgrade yourself. Don't, like short sell yourself, and, make sure you got your content down right. So when you can pitch like something to someone through a DM or something like that, you can be as specific. And I think it's important to be authentic but transparent as well. Don't like downsell it, but kind of like, for example, I would often say, look, I really like so and so aspects of you, your content. This is the reason why I'm reaching out. This is what my show is about. This is the name. If you want to check out some episodes, you could probably even list some of the people you've interviewed. And then give the ball to them and say that, look, reach out to me if you're ever interested. I would love that. And give them the options and kind of tell them how it works as well. Be specific about measurements and details in terms of like timing. So that's what I was talking about before. So I have worked out, for example, generally small topics that are more impromptu and a bit rambly. I keep it usually, except for something like this episode, which is quite informative as well. I keep it around something like 10 minutes. A lot of episodes go 10 to 15 minutes. Anything that's more substantial, like interviews or experience-based, that's like very, very sort of immersive, or like I take you along, that would go from like 20 to 25 minutes to about an hour. So there's a little bit more leeway on that depending on what it is. Okay, and the next thing I really want to cover is you obviously want to I think it's a really good investment to have, and I have on a wall basically a whiteboard marker, so I can kind of list out my schedule for like filming. So like I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the date, and then I'll list out like the topic of what I'm filming. And then sometimes I plan 2 weeks ahead, which is something I started recently because I have so many ideas. It's actually really easy to do that, and does kind of clear up my week for me, makes it easier to kind of draw out my schedule. And then in works with that, basically I have my notes app, which has a specific note where it's my schedule, and then that usually has the dates, but then every single day I list out like with dashes in between the tasks that I need to complete that day. And that usually also tells me, so like on the in-between days that I'm listed on the board is when, like, say Tuesday, I'll say Tuesday film for Wednesday, this topic, you need to go where, you need to do this, you need to bring what with you, all that kind of stuff. So it's like detailed planning. So that's really important for me, and I have found it to be super, super useful, especially because I've got a million things running through my mind all the time and new ideas. I've got a lot to sort through. And so along with script planning, scripts I usually use Notepad for, the Notes app for. So that's really easy. And then what I do is I then usually send them through email to use on my iPad, because I'll be using my phone to record. So, I can't access my Notes app from there. And as a sort of a safety net, I guess, or reference, I also have a copy of my scripts essentially in my emails always, of like scripts that I've used and finished off with, and I can delete the Notes app and keep the app relatively clean and organized. which is a big part of when you're doing such a long project. And the other thing you really need to consider and plan out is what kind of edits you need to kind of have. So one would be your bulk edit, which is your actual episode. And once you're done with that, you also need to consider, you might want to see, for some people, they film something completely different for this, or they would just chop up bits of their actual content from that episode and use that as promotional content. So what I usually write is the things that I cover are episode, promo reel. So sometimes I film extra for that with the interviewee, or sometimes I just chop content if it's just like certain other episodes, to promote it. And the other thing I write down is platforms. So I just remember I need to cover YouTube. For me, I cover YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok. And I basically would do, so when I come to uploading, I upload my main episode, then I schedule my reels, because I usually do it ahead of time, obviously, and don't leave it till last minute, because my update timings are usually like 7 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which is really early. I don't wake up that early. So I use the schedule reel, and then you want to make sure you hashtag. I know hashtag is kind of dead, and it's also like not always recommended, because there's a weird thing about hashtags too. Something about after a certain amount of reach, hashtag actually the video kind of dies with it, essentially. But I think it's really important when you're reaching out to new groups of people. It's pretty important to kind of try to push that. So I generally do hashtags for my video. At the moment, at this stage, it definitely helps with YouTube. YouTube, I found, has been easier to get a lot more views compared to Instagram at the moment. But I promote both sides in tandem, so just try to cover all of the everything both ways if you can. And I guess I'll end with talking about some of the apps that I found pretty useful so far. So one of the apps that I'm currently using is called ABLAZE. So I haven't tried using it just yet. I've tested it out a little bit, but I haven't used it as an episode just yet. But there will be an episode I'm going to really need that for. So ABLAZE, you do have to pay for it. It's free for a tiny, tiny little bit, I think, for less than a week. And then it's like $79 for a year, which I accidentally paid for. So I guess I'm going to try to use it as much as possible. But ABLAZE basically is kind of like the news report kind of screening text kind of effect. So basically you go in, you put in your script, and then you have a button for the video. Go into the video setting, pretend right now I'm filming, I can basically see the text, and I can have it either I scroll it myself, or I can make it scroll in a certain speed downwards so I can read through it like a news reporter, which is really cool. And, there was an idea I wanted to do for a video, which made it very hard, because I was supposed to film both of myself interacting with each other. And it was way more challenging once I started doing it. And I didn't realize till I was actually doing it that it was almost impossible to do without some kind of assistance. And the other one I want to talk about is Base 44, which I think is very cool. I know AI is very divided right now, and it is like sometimes a rip off other things. So I definitely condone like AI art or certain things, but Base 44 I think is okay, because it's just essentially a coding app. So basically it is made for making an app that makes apps. So you go in, it's very simple. You have some daily credits that refreshes. You can use that to do what you want to do. You go in, you start by kind of explaining what kind of app you want to make. Be very specific and kind of list some criterias. For example, the first one I made was, I had an idea that it would be cool to kind of socialize with people by saying, like, today, let's say I kind of want to go out and hit up a cafe, and I just want to sit there and say, let's meet someone. So you can just check into that cafe and say, I'm in the mood to have a chat. And then someone doesn't have to check in. They can just walk in and then look for you and then go, hey, I saw you on the app. Let's have a chat. I have altered that a little bit, but that's essentially the gist of it, and that app is available. I'll list it down below as well. The other app I started was for my episode where recently I did a baking video of one of the cakes that I had in my cheesecake book. It has 25 cheesecake recipes, all unique and tested by me. And it's a super detailed book that covers with so much detail and pictures and instructions that it's made perfect for novice bakers as much as it is for experienced bakers. Bit of a plug for myself. So I basically tried to make it a bit more accessible because it was not selling well at the moment, not very well known. So I tried to cut it up into recipes. So I'm going to sell each recipe cards as sort of $10 cards. So through that app, and that's in tandem with the episode. So I show you kind of how it's made, what it looks like, but I won't give you the ingredients because you have to go and buy it. But the book itself is only like 20 something Australian dollars for like a huge ebook, like full of pictures. I think it's really, really good one that you should invest in. So, it's actually much better deal to just buy the book. That's kind of the idea. Anyway, yeah, I think that probably covers most of it. I'm sure I probably missed something, but you can let me know in the comment down below if there's any sort of areas and factors that you really wish to be covered. And I can give you my 2 cents on that in another episode. I think this has run long enough and I've rambled on long enough and I'm running out of breath. So I need to cool down and get some water because it's hot in here. But yeah, thank you for joining me in this episode. I hope it really, really educated you and give you some kind of direction if you're looking to start your podcast. And yes, there's a lot of podcasts around, but you can make it really unique. You can make it yours. And most importantly, you want to do it, go for it. You should. Don't hold yourself back just because there's a lot of people doing the same thing, and I would say don't wait for the right time. Now is always the right time. Go for it. Shoot your shot. Embrace the journey. Embrace the moment and grab the opportunity by the balls. And have fun with it. Always. I'll talk to you in the next episode. See ya.